Right, let's get started with today's card. I'm going to cut this down to 4 inches by 5 1/4. I do want an 1/8 of an inch border all around, and we're going to mount that onto a Whisper White top folded card. So I'll be right back while I go cut the paper. Alrighty, here we go. Here's our piece of paper all cut down to size. Now, this paper I am going to run through the Snowflake embossing folder, and I think that's going to give it just a nice bit of texture, and it's not going to compete with the background. I picked the paper that had a fairly neutral background so that the snowflakes really stood out and were the star of the show. I am going to spritz this once just to loosen the texture of the paper just a little bit. And that way when you run it through the embossing folder, the paper doesn't crack. And I am going to take this, run it through the die machine, and I will be right back. Look at all of that texture. That is pretty awesome. I just love embossing folders. I use them as much as I can and work them into designs wherever I can because they just add so much of an extra element onto your card. So I'm going to take this now and let that sit for a second. And I'm going to grab my ribbon because I do want to wrap the ribbon around it before I mount it down onto my top folding card. So for this ribbon, I'm using 2 different ribbons, and the first one is the Snowflake Splendor ribbon. It's a 1/4 inch wide, and it's this beautiful iridescent white ribbon. And the second ribbon is kind of a surprise. It comes from the Autumn Splendor, perhaps, the Autumn Suite that is in the new August to December catalog. And I thought that it went really well with the color of this paper. This is sort of a case of a card that was in the catalog, and the card that they had in the catalog was using this ribbon, and this ribbon is from the Flowers for Every Season set. It was actually a set of 3 different ribbons. But I really like the texture in this ribbon, and this card is going to be all about adding texture. Plus I thought the width of this was actually very compatible, so you did see a little bit of the ribbon and behind the iridescent ribbon. So let's mount that down real quick. Put some adhesive on the back to hold it in place real good. I sure hope that you're enjoying this Christmas in July card series. If you are, I sure would appreciate it if you wanted to recreate these projects on your own to shop from my online store. I would sure love to be your demonstrator, and you can find the link for that in the show notes below, as well as a way to contact me if you had more questions. Once I got the ribbon on the card, I realized that it really needed to have some dimensionals to raise it off the surface. I was afraid that the thickness of the ribbon was going to show through because the pattern paper is rather thin, so I added a bunch of dimensionals to the back. Now before I adhere that together, I am going to stamp something on the inside of my card, and I want to be able to do that before I fold it. I am going to take the Merry Christmas stamp, and that was part of the Poinsettia Petals stamp set. And I'm going to use that for the inside of the card. I am stamping this with the Just Jade ink. I think that is a very nice medium tone that complements the paper really well. Between that and the pool party, I think that's a very nice combination. So now that we have that all put together, let's mount this part of the card onto the card base. And this does provide a 1/4 inch, or sorry, 1/8 of an inch border all around. So I do want to make sure that I get that positioned, especially since I'm using dimensionals, before I press it down. Now I am going to take a glue dot or 2 and stick that underneath the ribbon just to help adhere that down a little bit. I should have done that before I stuck it on the backs. Okay, now the next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to stamp the outside greeting, and I'm going to be using the stamp from the Snowflake Wishes that says, "May your season sparkle." And I am going to stamp that onto some pool party paper, and then I'm going to cut it out with the largest of the strip dies from the Tasteful Labels die set. I'm going to be using the Just Jade ink for that as well. All right, the very next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine and cut this out, and I'll be right back. So I decided that I need a little bit more interest on the front of this label. So I'm going to add in Pool Party ink some of these little snowflakes to kind of surround the sentiment. That's just a nice tone-on-tone stamping. It's almost like they're hugging the sentiment. Okay, the next step now is I'm going to take a piece of Whisper White cardstock, and I am going to use the dies that are part of the Snowflake Wishes bundle, So Many Snowflakes, and I'm going to go cut out 3 snowflakes to put on the front. So I'm going to use the middle 3 snowflakes that have the most detail. Now these are pretty, but they don't have a lot of detail because they're meant to cut out either a stamped image or an image from the paper. And this one doesn't cut out a snowflake at all. It actually cuts a snowflake into your paper. So I'm going to take these over to the die cutting machine, and I will be right back. There we go. Here are our beautiful snowflakes. So I'm going to surround the sentiment with some snowflakes, and I am going to layer them. So there's one behind, one in front, kind of casing it like from the card in the catalog. I'm going to adhere these onto the card with some glue dots, and that way they stick real nice. These glue dots are 3/16 of an inch, and they really could use to be 1/8 of an inch. They are a little large for how fine these snowflakes are. Now I am going to use adhesive to hold this down onto the card. Because we want to make sure that we can get the ribbon to sit nicely. Now, if we're talking about sparkling, we do need to add a little bit of bling onto our card. So I'm going to take some of these blue adhesive back gems, and I'm going to use the darker ones and add just a little bit of sparkle onto the card. I'm also going to add a little bit more sparkle using some of the snowflakes that were in the snowflake sequence. If you saw my video on the shaker card, you know that I use these along with some whale sequins to fill the shaker card. And I think this just needs a little extra bling on it, so let's add a little sparkle to our card. There we have our beautiful, sort of cased, sparkly snowflake card. I hope you enjoyed this video. There will be more holiday videos in the bottom corner playlist, as well as a related video up above. And if you could please hit the subscribe button and get notified of more videos as I publish them, I'd be most appreciative. Thanks, and have a fantastic day.